Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. My name is Oliver Smith, and I'm 33 years old. For more than 8 years, I've shared my life with Linda, a vibrant and captivating woman who's just a year younger than me. Our marriage, although still young in many ways, has not been without its challenges. Like all couples, we've weathered our fair share of highs and lows. What I'm about to recount is how our relationship almost came undone. It all began one evening when I was casually scrolling through an online article. The piece discussed some groundbreaking discoveries made by satellites, discoveries that had completely upended what we thought we knew about space. I found myself smirking at the thought of how easily we cling to so-called facts, only to discard them when new data surfaces. Theories taught in schools, held up as gospel, are quickly replaced, and the experts of yesterday fade into obscurity, replaced by newer voices. As I was lost in these musings, Linda, my wife of 8 years, walked into the living room. There was something different about her demeanor, a confidence that seemed almost rehearsed. Without preamble, she announced that she had made plans for Friday. She was going out on a date with a male colleague. The words struck me like a lightning bolt. This wasn't the Linda I thought I knew. She stood there, one hand resting casually on her hip, her expression daring me to argue. I could tell she was bracing herself for a fight, but had already made up her mind not to waver. Linda has always enjoyed a good debate, and though I sometimes find her reasoning questionable, she usually wins by sheer willpower. Yet never before had our disagreements broached anything as serious as this. Then came the next blow, one that left me completely numb. "This doesn't mean I don't love you," she said, her voice unsettlingly calm. "I just want to try new things, meet different people, maybe go out with other men. It's about expanding my horizons. It won't change what we have, though. I'll always come back to you. We're forever. I honestly think this will make us stronger. Maybe I'll even pick up a few things we can use in the bedroom." She said all of this as if her words were meant to reassure me, as though they would somehow make me feel better about the situation. I sat there frozen, my mind spiraling. My first instinct was a flood of rage, an overwhelming urge to lash out, whether physically or verbally. I was consumed with violent thoughts. I envisioned chaos, screaming matches, divorce, and even worse. I wanted to explode, to demand explanations, to storm out of the house and never return. But as her speech, which I suspected she had rehearsed, came to a close, I felt a shift within me. Another approach, a completely different one, began to form in my mind. I recalled a story I had read years ago, one about Tom Sawyer and how he tricked his friends into doing his chores by making them believe it was something enjoyable. The power of perception dawned on me, and suddenly my strategy changed. Instead of reacting with fury, I turned to Linda with a wide smile, feigning excitement. "That's a brilliant idea," I said, my voice brimming with enthusiasm. "You're going out this Friday? Wow, that's fantastic. I hadn't even thought of that." My sudden approval caught her completely off guard, and she frowned, visibly confused. She hesitated. "Oh, I didn't think you'd be okay with it. I thought you'd be angry." Still grinning, I took her hands and looked directly into her eyes. "No, this is incredible news," I exclaimed. "You see, there's a woman at the gym I've noticed. She's made it pretty clear she's interested in me, but I've always turned her down because I'm married. Now, thanks to you, I can reach out and see where it leads. You've just opened up a whole new world for us." As I spoke, I could see the color drain from Linda's face. The confident woman who had marched into the room moments earlier was nowhere to be found. It took everything in me not to laugh out loud at how quickly her plan had unraveled. I strolled towards the kitchen, fighting back the grin that threatened to spread across my face. Over my shoulder, I tossed a casual, "I'm grabbing some mineral water. Sure you don't want anything?" Her reply came back, rough and uncertain. "No thanks." The tension in her voice was unmistakable. Confusion mixed with unease. The subtle teasing was working far better than any confrontation would have. And the best part? No risk of any legal trouble. As I stood before the wall calendar, I dropped my voice to a theatrical murmur, as if delivering lines in a play. Let's see. Tomorrow's Wednesday, right? That's when she usually shows up, bright and early. I'll need to hit the gym a bit earlier just to make sure I catch her. Hopefully she's still interested and hasn't gotten bored. Now, let's see if Friday is open. I was counting on Friday. The thought of her curvy silhouette kept replaying in my head. I wanted to make sure that by the end of it, we'd both be completely worn out. The plan was flawless. All I needed was to pack my gym bag, toss it in the car, and maybe splash on some cologne. Friday couldn't come soon enough, just me and her. Feeling smug, I took a sip of mineral water, eyes fixed on the calendar. But really, my focus was on Linda, watching her from the corner of my eye. She was frowning, probably trying to piece things together. What's wrong? This isn't quite what you expected, is it? Though she stayed silent, the stiffness in her body and the sharpness of her breath told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't unfolding how she had imagined. Perfect. I moved back to the couch, pretending to read an article, but the words were meaningless. My mind was on Linda. I watched her without looking directly, her discomfort palpable. I could almost hear her mind whirring, trying to find the right words, preparing for a fight she thought was inevitable. She was likely bracing for the arguments she expected me to throw at her, rehearsing her lines in advance. But how could she argue without exposing herself? That was her problem to figure out. After what felt like forever, she sighed deeply and finally broke the silence. I'm tired. I think I'll head to bed. Are you coming up soon, Oliver? I nodded, keeping my voice even. Yeah, I'll be up in about half an hour after I finish reading this. Good night, Oliver, she said softly, leaning in for a quick kiss. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, glancing back one more time. I love you. The weight of those words hit me hard. A sharp ache rippled through me, a blend of disappointment and sadness. I knew we had reached a pivotal moment in our relationship. The choices we made now would define the road ahead, and it was bound to be a difficult one. Sitting there, my mind replayed everything that had led us to this point. I had always taken Linda at her word, but maybe I'd been too trusting. Perhaps it was time to start questioning things. As I sifted through the details, nothing substantial jumped out at me, until I remembered the phone calls and texts. Recently, there had been a few whispered conversations she'd taken in secluded corners of the house. When I'd asked, she told me they were from her sister and that it was private. Fair enough, I'd thought. Everyone deserves some privacy. But it didn't sit right with me. Normally, she would answer calls from her sister right in front of me, and they never seemed particularly secretive. She would even share the details with me later, giving updates or telling funny stories about her family. But over the last few weeks, that openness had evaporated. The texts were strange, too. She'd been getting more of them, and they always seemed to bring a smile to her face or a soft laugh. I decided to dig deeper. While Linda was in the bathroom getting ready for bed, I sat at the computer and pulled up the call logs from our phones. Over the past 2 weeks, there were 4 calls and 6 texts from a number I didn't recognize, all during the evening. To rule out her sister, I checked the contact list. No match. I jotted down the number and, on a whim, did a quick online search. The number was linked to a man named Jason Maston. He lived right here in our city. I scribbled down his address, feeling a tight knot forming in my gut. Something wasn't adding up. I logged into the website of Linda's employer. She was the head of HR at Ryder Brothers Engineering, handling schedules, vacations, sick leave, and various admin tasks. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something was definitely wrong. She had access to the company's employee database, and I'd helped her with it a few times before, running targeted searches when she needed specific contact details, things like phone numbers or email addresses. But now, things had taken a darker turn. Someone had been messaging and calling my wife, and it wasn't a relative or friend. This man was no one she should be communicating with. Our marriage hung by a thread, and I knew if I discovered that she had gone too far with him, that would be the end for us. I logged into her email account, feeling a small sense of control when I saw that her password hadn't changed. It was a tiny comfort, a sign that maybe I wasn't completely losing my grip on the situation. There were no direct emails from this guy, Jason, but when I searched his name, a few references appeared in the messages. A woman named Darcy Sellers had written to my wife, informing her that Jason had been asking around about her, trying to get her personal information. Darcy let Linda know that Jason found her attractive and was eager to sleep with her. Not only that, but Darcy herself seemed to approve, suggesting Linda should have a little fun with him. The thread was full of playful, suggestive comments from Darcy, encouraging Linda to take the plunge. Linda hadn't confirmed she would go through with it, but Darcy was relentless, practically egging her on to make it happen. It seemed like this weekend was set to be their first meetup, a test run to see where things might lead. The thought alone made me sick. I paced around the house aimlessly, pretending to pack my gym clothes while making as much noise as possible. Tomorrow, I'd head to the gym, though the workout wasn't my main focus. I felt restless, unable to sleep, my mind racing with questions about where our relationship was heading. The next morning, Wednesday, I forced myself out of bed early, putting on a fake smile before heading to the gym. I wanted her to wonder what was going on in my head. At the gym, I kept to myself, not interacting much, just going through the motions. Afterward, I went straight to work, trying to distract myself with my tasks. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the gnawing thoughts about Linda and Jason. Despite that, I somehow managed to get through the day. That evening, as I pulled into the driveway, I saw Linda's car already in the garage. When I touched the hood, it was still warm. She hadn't been home long. Standing by the door to the kitchen, I took a deep breath and steeled myself for what I needed to do next. I opened the door and greeted her with a smile. "Hey, baby," I said, walking toward the bedroom while loosening my tie and slipping off my jacket. As I climbed the stairs, I called back to her, "Linda, we should talk about this weekend. We need to lay out some ground rules for the future," I continued, "so we both know exactly where we stand." Her response was soft, almost hesitant. "Yeah, we should talk. I already ordered Chinese for dinner. Hope that's okay." There was a tremor in her voice, a sign of uncertainty. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. When I returned to the kitchen, now dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, the food had arrived. We filled our plates in silence, the clatter of the cardboard containers the only sound between us. Finally, I broke the quiet. "Since you've had time to plan out this weekend, and I'm just now catching up with our new arrangement, I've come up with a few ideas of my own. I even made a flowchart." I gave her a half smile. "You can take the guy out of programming, but you can't take the programming out of the guy." I unfolded a piece of paper and laid it on the table. "I think we need to set some guidelines to avoid stepping on each other's toes or, worse, completely tearing each other apart. These are just suggestions, but I think they're worth considering." Linda's eyes widened as she inhaled sharply, but she didn't interrupt. "First off," I said, keeping my voice calm, "nothing happens in our home. This is our space, and it needs to stay that way." She nodded slightly, but said nothing. "Second, we need to treat each other with respect, no matter who else is involved. No insults, no putting each other down in front of anyone. That kind of behavior will only hurt us in the end." She took another deep breath, but I continued. "Third, our plans together take priority. We don't cancel or rearrange things just because someone else wants to meet. And lastly, no lies, no deceit. We're supposed to be partners, and dishonesty will destroy us faster than anything else." I paused, waiting for her to say something. Linda's face was pale, and she was having trouble swallowing her food. "These are just a few thoughts I had," I added, "but I think it's important we talk this through and come to some kind of agreement like adults. What do you think?" By now we were sitting at the table, face to face. Linda seemed to struggle with her food, as if the reality of the situation was too much for her to digest. Linda sat quietly, her gaze fixed on her plate, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying a weight of hesitation. "I'm starting to doubt everything. It's all becoming too much, too confusing," she murmured, absent-mindedly running her fingers along the edge of her fork. Her words lingered in the air as my phone vibrated on the table, its screen lighting up. I glanced at it, raising my eyebrows in mock surprise to hide any hint of suspicion. Hold that thought. I need to take this, I said, excusing myself quickly. I hurried to our small office, closing the door firmly behind me to stifle the noise of my conversation. Once inside, I switched my phone to record mode before answering in a low voice. Hello? The voice on the other end was thick with an accent. Mr. Smith, this is the IRS. We've found that you owe $1,500 in unpaid taxes from 2020th year. Feigning enthusiasm, I replied, Hey, I'm so glad you called. Yeah, I can't wait for Friday night. What time works best for you? As I spoke, I caught a faint glow filtering through the crack at the bottom of the door, and the outline of two small shadows hovering near it. Linda was eavesdropping. This isn't a game. You owe $1,500, and if you don't pay right now, we'll send the police to arrest you. The voice grew more forceful. Perfect. Friday sounds great. I'll pick you up around 7 and we can grab dinner. Then maybe we can head back to your place to wrap up the night. What kind of food do you like? I kept my voice light, fully aware that Linda was listening to every word. The caller, growing angrier, snapped back, This is not a joke. If you don't buy gift cards worth $1,500 and give us the numbers, the police will come to your house. I chuckled. You're such a tease. We can skip dinner if you'd rather. I just thought we could start the evening off right. The whole weekend? Well, let's see how Friday goes, and we can take it from there. You're going to regret this! The police are on their way! The caller shouted, clearly losing patience. All right, I'll make it up to you, I swear, I said, struggling to contain my laughter. You're driving me crazy here! You idiot! You'll be in jail before the night is over! The voice fumed before the call abruptly ended. I stood there for a moment, still amused, before composing myself and heading back to the dining room. Linda stood by the table, her face pale. Who was that? She asked, her voice shaky. I resisted the temptation to joke and say, Jake from State Farm, but instead I kept my tone serious. Just a scammer pretending to be the IRS demanding gift cards. I thought it was something important, but it turned out to be nonsense, I explained, shaking my head as if in disbelief. It's sad, really, how far people will go to rip others off. Linda didn't look convinced. I'll have to reheat my food, I muttered, walking toward the kitchen with a casual tone, though I could feel her eyes burning into my back. Trying to lighten the mood, I started whistling a cheerful tune as I busied myself with the microwave. When I returned to the table, Linda hadn't moved. She was still staring at me, her eyes filled with distrust. That didn't sound like a scam call, she muttered under her breath. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, were you listening in? I asked sharply. What happened to those lectures you gave me about privacy whenever I asked about the calls from your so-called sister? Interesting how that works. I couldn't resist making air quotes around the word sister. The room fell into silence, but the tension between us was impossible to ignore. Finally, Linda put her fork down, her voice steady as she spoke. I don't want you seeing your friend this weekend. She locked eyes with me, the intensity of her gaze unmistakable. I met her stare, my voice steady as I asked, So, what exactly is your plan for me while you're out on your date? Should I just sit here, maybe take up knitting? My expression shifted into a smirk, my tone rising with frustration. You better listen up. I've got choices too, you know. If you're planning on rewriting the rules of our marriage, don't think I'm just going to sit around and watch. This is supposed to be a partnership, not a joke. If you want to make a fool of me while you run off with someone else, then maybe we're done here. Go ahead, find someone willing to put up with that crap. But it sure as hell won't be me. Linda's glare intensified as she shoved her chair back, pushing away from the table. Why can't you be more like Tony Sellers? He doesn't mind that his wife wants to have some fun. Tony just lets Darcy do her thing. My retort was sharp and immediate. Maybe you should have married Tony Sellers then. Without another word, she stomped off to the bedroom, slamming the door with a force that rattled the walls. I remained at the table, staring at the half-eaten orange chicken that now tasted like sawdust in my mouth. Eventually, I wrapped up the leftovers and shoved them into the fridge. Part of me wanted to follow her, bang on the door and let everything explode into a full-blown fight, but I knew it wasn't the right time. Linda needed space, needed to mull over what I'd said. I had laid my cards on the table. Now it was up to her to decide what to do with them. As I sat down on the couch, my stomach churned with unease. This was a turning point in our marriage, and I couldn't help but replay the moment in my head, hoping my reaction had hit the mark. Linda had to realize the damage she'd done. I wanted her to feel just a shred of the hurt I'd endured. Only time would reveal what came next. Meanwhile, I found myself reflecting on what I really wanted. I still cared about her, but it was becoming clearer that she had been swept up in Darcy's influence and some misguided fantasy. The attention from this new guy at work had likely skewed her perspective on our relationship. Sure, I've had moments when women showed interest in me, and while I'm far from a movie star, I'm aware of how easily those things can cloud your judgment. If she kept going down this road, we were finished. But deep down, I clung to a hope that my words had forced her to see the bigger picture. I decided to take matters into my own hands. A quick internet search provided all the information I needed about divorce in our state. The division of assets was simple, 50-50, given that we earned about the same and didn't have kids or much property to fight over. I printed out some preliminary divorce papers and even looked into prenuptial agreements, just in case we managed to work things out but needed stricter boundaries going forward. My trust in her was severely fractured, and at the very least, we needed to have a serious talk. I was done being passive. I could see her little speech from the previous day as a test, pushing to see how far she could go. I hoped she hadn't crossed the point of no return, but if she had cheated, there was no coming back from that. I paced around the house, restless, trying to pass the time while giving her space to process everything. Waiting was all I could do. Over an hour passed before I heard the bedroom door creak open. Linda stepped into the living room, her movements slow, her demeanor softened. "Can we talk, Oliver?" Her voice was quiet, regretful, a stark contrast to the defiant tone she'd used the night before. "Of course," I replied, doing my best to sound open and calm. "Come sit here." I gestured to the spot beside me on the couch. I wanted to make it easy for her to speak. She lowered herself onto the couch, her hands trembling slightly. "Oliver, I've been acting like a fool," she admitted, and for a second I couldn't believe she was actually saying it. I remained still, unsure of how deep this confession would go. "I've been flirting with a guy from work," she said, eyes cast downward. "We've had lunch a few times, and I even agreed to go on a date with him this weekend." My chest tightened, but I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "Darcy encouraged it," she added, her voice faltering. "Darcy's been having affairs for years, even though she's still married. She talks about it all the time, like it's no big deal. Her husband knows, and he's fine with it. She even helped me figure out how to bring it up to you, coached me on all the things I should say to make it seem reasonable." Linda paused, her voice cracking. "I rehearsed everything, prepared for every argument you might throw at me, just to make sure I could get away with being selfish. I wasn't prepared for how quickly you accepted it, how eager you were to move on. What truly shook me, though, was finding out you already had someone else ready to step in where I had once been. It crushed me. Yet what could I possibly say in defense? There were no words that could undo that blow. You hurt me deeply. I tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind spun endlessly, replaying the pain you inflicted, and then, in the stillness of the night, it hit me. This was exactly how I had treated you. You weren't pretending to be hurt, but now I saw it clearly, felt it from your side. You were just giving me a taste of my own cruelty, letting me feel what you'd gone through. The weight of that realization nearly broke me. With a bitter smile, she muttered, "You really did a number on me, didn't you? You jerk." She paused, then continued, "I spent the whole day convincing myself that maybe you imagined it all, until that call came. Did you really go through with that? Just when I thought I'd pulled myself together, you hit me again with that talk, and I realized we were hanging by a thread, on the brink of disaster. I feel like the biggest fool. I married you for so many reasons, and you've always been everything I could have hoped for. But I got lost in someone else's attention, in the thrill of being noticed, of feeling young again. It was intoxicating, being pursued like that. It made me feel special, alive. But then you reminded me that you're special too, that I could lose you, and I realized I couldn't let that happen. I don't want to lose you, and I won't. I love you, only you. I've just canceled everything for this weekend, and I told him it's over. We'll never see each other again. And I need you to know, I swear on everything that matters to me, I never physically cheated. I never crossed that line. But I got too close, and I know what I said last night makes you question that. I see the doubt in your eyes. How can I convince you to call off your plans, to come back to me, to us? How can I get you to come back to me and me alone? Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time I felt like I could breathe again. But then I hesitated. We couldn't just erase the last few days. A rift had formed between us, deep, painful, and it would take time and effort to bridge that divide. Could we ever rebuild the trust we once had? How could we be certain of each other's intentions from now on? You say you've canceled your plans, but how can I be sure this isn't just a postponement? What if you're waiting for another opportunity, with Jason or someone else, to betray me again? Or what if this is just a ploy to make me cancel my own plans? How can I trust you after this? When trust is shattered, can it ever truly be repaired? Will I have to live the rest of our marriage questioning everything? Will I need to test your loyalty at every turn? My voice trembled with barely contained anger as I asked these questions, the weight of my emotions threatening to crush me. She looked at me, shocked, and whispered, "You know his name? How? When did you find out?" I didn't answer. I let her sit in the silence, absorbing the shock of what I'd just revealed. When she first sat down, she had kept her distance, but now she shifted closer, wrapping her arms around me tightly. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Can we just be us for a little while? Just until we figure this out? I don't want to think about any of it right now." "It's too much," she said softly. "Let's just be together tonight and we'll talk more tomorrow. I just want to feel close to you again, to hold on to the hope that you won't shut me out. I'm sorry for bringing us here. God, I don't want this to be the end." "Please," she whispered, resting her head on my chest as I leaned back. We sat there in silence, holding each other, breathing in rhythm, trying to find some comfort in the quiet. But despite the physical closeness, the emotional distance between us lingered. There was so much to work through, so much to rebuild, if that was even possible. Later, as we went to bed, she reached for me, trying to connect, but the chasm between us remained. I drifted into a shallow sleep, only to wake up to the sound of her soft sobbing and the faint murmur of the word, "fool," slipping from her lips. I can't believe how naive I've been. Darcy, why did I ever listen to you? We shared a bed, but the distance between us was impossible to ignore. Neither of us slept well, tossing and turning, each lost in our own thoughts, weighed down by regret. The night dragged on, and Thursday promised nothing more than a day filled with uneasy waiting and self-reflection. Before we went our separate ways for work, we agreed that once home, we would face the difficult conversation we had been avoiding for too long. Dinner was intentionally kept simple, just some leftover Chinese takeout from the night before. No wine, no beer, no distractions. This conversation demanded total clarity. As the evening wore on, so did the inevitable confrontation. I laid 2 folders on the table, one with divorce papers, the other containing a prenuptial agreement. Each sat neatly inside its own file, labeled clearly for what was to come. I marked the folders A and B, placing them face down on the table. Linda eyed them nervously before looking back at me, her face tight with anxiety. I waited, letting the silence stretch. Since she was the one who had opened the door to this mess, it seemed only fair that she should be the one to start addressing it. Finally, she broke the silence. "Oliver, I'm sorry. I regret everything that's happened. I just want to close this chapter and never look back. Do you think there's any way we can erase what happened and move forward? I made a terrible mistake. Can you forgive me?" Her words were pleading, her smile strained with hope. "No," I said firmly. The word landed like a blow. She looked stunned, but I wasn't finished. "Linda, over the past few weeks, you've been lying to me about those calls you claimed were from your sister. They weren't. They were from a man you were planning to have an affair with. You admitted to flirting, having lunches with him, and getting close, all while hiding it from me. Someone who loves and respects me wouldn't do that. Her face crumpled even more as I continued. You've shattered my trust, so we're left with two paths forward. Option A, I said, sliding one folder toward her, is an agreement that sets clear boundaries. It outlines what's acceptable for both of us. It's strict and non-negotiable. If we can't agree on it, then there's option B. Option B? She echoed, her voice trembling. I nodded. Divorce. We divide everything equally and we go our separate ways. Divorce? She gasped, panic creeping into her voice. No, Oliver, please, I can't imagine life without you. Please forgive me. I waited for her to calm down before I continued. Linda, I don't want that either. But if we can't rebuild trust, that's where this will lead. Her expression shifted from desperation to frustration. And what about you? She shot back. I know you lied to me about that call yesterday. It wasn't from some scammer, was it? Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. See? Trust is fragile once it's broken. I stayed composed. We'll discuss that later, after we decide on the terms of option A. Can we at least try to come up with a plan we can both live with? I made it clear that this agreement was not something to be taken lightly. We both had to be fully committed to it. Linda begrudgingly picked up her copy, muttering under her breath about how excessive it seemed. This is so strict, she mumbled as she skimmed the pages. We always have to have our phones on with a tracking app so we know where the other person is. If you leave work, you have to send a message saying where you're going and when you'll be back. Constantly carry your phone with the tracker on and be ready for surprise check-ins. She sighed deeply, reading further. If you're going out after work, you have to say where you're going and keep your phone on. This feels like being put on a leash. Yes, I replied. It's a short leash, but over time we won't need it anymore, hopefully. Linda set her copy down, her eyes heavy with sorrow as they met mine. I can't believe we've reached this point, but I understand why. I'm so sorry for breaking your trust. Her voice softened, and she added, I agree to the terms, but I want something more. I want us to spend real time together again, going on dates, just the two of us. Let's talk about our feelings, our dreams, and what we want for the future. I want us to be stronger. I need us to survive this. Her words hit me, and despite everything, I couldn't help but smile. That sounds like a good idea, I said, feeling a small glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. We made a few tweaks to our agreement and signed the updated version. Linda, wearing a playful grin, quipped that we should probably add a clause requiring regular serious sex. According to her, it would keep us either too exhausted or too in love to notice anyone else. We shared a laugh and jokingly added the clause as an amendment. I mentioned how she tends to win most of our arguments. She then stood up, walked over to me, and settled into my lap. Her kisses were intense, filled with warmth and the promise of a hopeful future. Promise me we'll be all right, that you still want me to be your wife, she murmured softly. I cupped her face in my hands, gazed into her eyes, and replied, I do, I really do. I want you to be my wife. I think we'll be okay. Now let's talk about that phone call. Linda, suddenly serious, nodded. I took out my phone and played the recording for her. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she burst out, Oh my God, you sly fox! Mental note, never challenge you again. She gave me a light punch on the arm, laughing, before pulling me in for another kiss. The newly signed agreement stated that serious sex should commence immediately, and since it was in black and white, we didn't delay. That happened a few months ago, and everything's been running smoothly since. We've only referred to the agreement occasionally, though the sex has been frequent, and truthfully, it's brought us closer. I've gotten into the habit of showing up at her lunch meetings unannounced, and every time she greets me warmly, proudly introducing me to her colleagues. We've been spending more time together, sharing everything in life. Things are going well. One evening, while we were lounging on the couch planning a long weekend getaway, Linda's phone rang. She frowned slightly and muttered, Why is my boss calling this late? She answered with, Hi, Betty. This is unexpected. Is everything okay? I could barely hear the voice on the other end, but Linda's expression shifted quickly. You're joking! When did this happen? She exclaimed. There was more murmuring from the other side before Linda shook her head in disbelief. Wow, that's unbelievable. All right, I'll reach out to the team now. See you tomorrow at 7 a.m. in the main conference room. Got it. Good night, Betty. As she hung up, Linda stared at her phone, her face clouded with worry. I turned to her, concerned. What's going on? You look really unsettled. She met my eyes, her expression still troubled. All the HR staff have to attend a meeting tomorrow about some leadership changes. Lawyers are cracking down on workplace relationships. Apparently, Darcy was caught at home with Jason Maston. Her husband, Tony, walked in on them, and Jason had the nerve to mock Tony, even laugh at him. Linda paused, her voice quieter. That's when Tony lost it. He dragged Jason out of the house by his hair and beat him, while he was completely naked. Jason's in the hospital now, and they say his face is so badly injured he might lose an eye. Darcy tried to stop it and got caught in the chaos. She's missing some teeth and is in the hospital too. Tony's been arrested. I raised an eyebrow and gave her a knowing look, but before I could say anything, Linda raised her hand to stop me. Don't. I know exactly what you're thinking. She sighed before adding, I get it. I almost made the same mistake as Darcy, but Tony clearly didn't handle it the way she thought he would. Damn. I couldn't hold back anymore. From what I've heard, Darcy and Tony are older than us. Tony probably had more at stake in a divorce. Maybe that's why he tolerated it for so long. I guess he just snapped. Linda sighed again, lightly punching me in the chest. I told you not to comment, she said with a teasing smile. I chuckled, but there was a somberness to the conversation that hung in the air. It was tragic to think about how 3 lives had been ruined by reckless decisions. I'm just grateful we're not headed down that road, I said quietly. Hopefully, we've both learned something from their mistakes. For now, things are different for us, but maybe, just maybe one day, we can return to how things used to be. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.